Ladies and gentlemen, America is at a crossroads. Truth and freedom are on the line. Join us as we stand to rescue America. Join the FlashPoint Army, people that believe like you. Click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to stay connected. Like our forefathers, we're standing for faith, family, and freedom. Join us. And remember, it's not over. Let me show you this first. This is the graphic of Fox, who won the debate, the first day after the debate. Of course, you see Biden 33%, Trump 67%. This was almost across the board. This was actually that night. So, I mean, everybody, it was amazing to me. CNN from the very beginning said he lost. He couldn't do anything. He should step down. In fact, that was a little surprising to me. Vox post, in politics, Joe Biden should save his legacy by ending his candidacy. The case for anybody else. I'm like, really? It goes on. President Biden's my friend. He must bow out of the race, from Thomas Friedman. Frank Bruni. Biden can't go on like this. Patrick Healy, I'm hearing high anxiety from Democrats over Biden's debate performance. Nicholas Kristof, President Biden, it's time to drop out. And then this is the big one, Time magazine. Yes, this is a real magazine cover. Panic with the picture of Joe walking over out of the cover. What do you think? Listen, for you, I got to show you this one, Rick. You'll like this one. This is Matt Gaetz. How long until the Democrats claim the debate was actually Russian disinformation? Any thoughts there, Rick?
Well, I thought Matt Gaetz may say it was an AI impersonation of both guys who didn't actually exist. But I mean, several thoughts. First of all, those numbers after the debate, I don't know that there's been one that bad, that lopsided since Reagan-Mondale in '84. I mean, it was truly astonishing. Secondly, I noticed when you were playing the Ohio clips that I haven't changed shirts since Friday night in Ohio. So, that tells you how hard I'm working across the country.
That's right. Anyway, it does. I hope you have more than one of those.
When you played, I watched it and I was like, oh my, I'm wearing the same shirt I was wearing Friday. Oh, well, so much for wardrobe. All right, listen, I also, you mentioned Canada. Listen, to our fellow patriots and our fellow believers in Canada, don't forget that your Charter of Rights and Freedoms is based on the American Bill of Rights and based on our Declaration of Rights all the way back to Virginia. So you enjoy many of the same freedoms despite the tyrant Trudeau. You need to get Trudeau off the stage and the rest of the tyrants in Canada and restore freedom in Canada the same way that we're trying to do here in America. So thank you to the truckers and others in Canada that are leading the way on that. All right, back to and one last thing. The statement that you made, Gene, listen, you're right. You're right about most of that. But I'm going to side with Hank on this from this perspective. Joe Biden's the one that put us all in this position. Joe Scarborough and the rest of the media that lied to the American people for the last 4 years. We've known that Joe Biden was not capable of doing this job from the time he got elected. The 25th Amendment should have been invoked years ago, and it wasn't. And they've put us in this position to where you have to poke fun to get people to pay attention. It's so absurd, the things that he's done and said, and it's been so obvious, and they've sat there and lied to the American people over it. And so sometimes, like you said at the beginning of your statement, we try to use some humor to frankly deal with a subject that is really sad. And we've said that on this program, that this is sad what they're doing to him. It's elder abuse, and Joe Biden is responsible for it as much as anybody else and the others that are holding on the power behind the scenes.
Now watch this. One of the moderators, something you probably didn't see. I didn't see it until somebody put this out. This is Bash. As she was trying to watch how she's trying to point Joe over to the other camera. Watch.
President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch. Overwhelming border states, and under the issue of immigration and border security, President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the...
In case temporarily allowed.
All right, so you see that the point there is they were trying to help the man out, and I appreciate that, but anybody watching that night, I think, can honestly say this was not a good decision to debate. Rick, I'll let you comment.
Yeah, honestly, man, I was surprised they didn't help him more. Well, I shouldn't say I was surprised. We talked about this months ago here on FlashPoint that we have thought all along that they would remove him as the candidate, that he would not be the candidate in November. They had to do something. And we also thought that eventually the media would turn on him and that this was a hit job, a setup. And so I think that's why they came across more fair than they typically do in a presidential race, especially against Donald Trump. I mean, normally they are so biased against him. It's terrible.
I got to tell you, from just my personal opinion, it feels like they set the man up. Pastor Hank, it feels like they just set him up to fail.
Well, I think their whole system and administration and their agenda is failing, Pastor Gene. God already said this when we first started on FlashPoint. I don't know if you remember, and those of you that were with us from the beginning, God said there would be a great unraveling, and there would be boomerangs, and we would see a pushback that ultimately would lead to a put it back. But, I really feel like, one of the things that's happening is we cannot forget that this fake administration is what I always call it. They laughed when they introduced this COVID, and they laughed when they made up 6 feet social distancing. They laughed when they didn't care about our loved ones, some that died because they blocked different methods to be cured from COVID. So they've been laughing right along. And we got to remember something about Psalm 126. God said that one of the ways that you turn a nation is when God begins to fill his people with laughter. It begins to turn the captivity of the nation. So I say that because even though there's a lot of things that maybe you're looking at it right now, like with the debate, you're going, man, how can they put this guy up here? We can't forget their agenda and how evil it's been. But lastly, Pastor Gene, I sense that God is doing something. You have to look at it from God's perspective. There was a day when God rejected a kingdom. It was a kingdom of Saul, and it began to unravel and fall apart. That's what you saw in the debate.
Right.
And then don't forget about Eli, a corrupt priest who also had corrupt sons. Remember what happened?
Yes.
God came in, and Eli fell backwards, and his sons were taken out. This is what's happening because of the level of wickedness that this administration has been a part of for many, many years. God is dealing with it with his righteousness and his justice.
All right, let me show you, Pastor Hank. I want you to watch this this video, and then I'll get to you. This is CNN's dismal debate performance was the way they called it. Watch.
As they're sort of going through how they get beyond that dismal debate performance, one of the options right now is that he would sit for a high-profile interview to try and show that North Carolina rally the day after the debate was not just a one-off, that he actually can do a sit-down interview, he can do a spontaneous interview. But the fact that we're even having this conversation, that the president can do an interview, sort of shows you where they are right now. I mean, the Biden campaign is trying to move beyond and sort of quiet the questions, but they've really struggled to do so over the last several days.
All right, just more information about them struggling. Okay, Pastor Hank.
Yeah. Well, I think that's exactly what you're seeing is they're scrambling for an answer. And I don't think putting him out there for a debate, an interview is really going to make a difference. But what has made a difference, and President Trump was absolutely smart, and that was to show up in what would be considered hostile territory. And he showed up as we suggested, we prayed for. If you remember last week on FlashPoint, something that I spoke, I felt very strongly, and I prayed for him. I know others did, that he would show up as a father figure to this country. And I applaud him because that's exactly what he did. And he was brilliant. He thought of America. He also reminded us that he is with us, and he understood the harshness of these last 4 years. And I think what that did is cause more and more people to get on the Trump train and begin to see that he is more than qualified to lead this country. But also, how about this? God's hand is on the man, and God's hand is on this country.
All right, let me play this from Fox. Jonathan Turley talks about the Supreme Court opinion. It's kind of long, but stay with it. Watch this.
In reading through this opinion, I can't see how this doesn't induce cardiac arrest with the special counsel. At one point in the opinion, they say, look, this is a quote, the indictment's allegations that Trump attempted to pressure the vice president to take particular acts in connection with his role with the certification proceeding thus involve official conduct. And Trump is at least presumptively immune from prosecution for such conduct. The court then goes on to say that the burden, of course, is on Jack Smith. He has to show that this does not pose any intrusions into to the executive branch, and the court says that that this quote may well hinder the president's ability to perform his constitutional functions. So here the court is imposing a very significant burden on Jack Smith when this goes back to the judge. We talked about how this trial judge has proven to be very favorable towards Jack Smith. She's certainly been motivated to try to get a trial before the election. But the court here is giving much more clear lines than some people expected. They're saying that there is a presumption here that you have to deal with. The burden is high, and the court indicates that it may view this as something that could hinder a president's authority.
Okay, a president's authority, Rick. I mean, now help break this down for us. The difference between they're talking about is during official actions versus unofficial.
Yeah.
Help us understand. Put that in layman's terms for us.
Well, let's back up and look at the big picture first. The big picture being the core accusation here is completely absurd. So in other words, we're going after a guy that is questioning the election results and just wants to make sure we got to the right answer. That means if you go back 25 years to my first race when I had a recount because I said, okay, that was pretty close. Can we just double check? Okay, now I'm going to be under indictment for just asking to double check, to actually use the process. Hillary Clinton should be indicted for questioning. Every one of those Hollywood morons that did that absurd ad in 2016 begging delegates to not vote, or I'm sorry, electors to not vote for Donald Trump, they would be under indictment. So the whole thing is absurd on its face. But now let's get into the weeds just a little bit. What we know is that Donald Trump did nothing criminal. He asked Mike Pence to follow the Constitution. He asked state officials to follow the Constitution and how the elector mess had happened. He just asked everybody to follow the Constitution. He asked citizens to stand up and speak. He asked everybody to be peaceful. So we know that's the case. So here's what the court had to decide. Does the president have immunity for his actions? And they came down with this sort of broken down test. They said if it's something that's his official duties as the executive, then it's absolutely immune. In other words, it's something under Article 2 in the Constitution that only the president does. If it's something that he shares with Congress, so it's something that he does and they do, which would really fall under this whole counting of the electors sort of thing, then it's presumptive but not absolute, meaning we're going to presume that his conversations with Mike Pence saying, hey, what's the history on this? What have vice presidents done before? You could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this. Basically looking at the history of it and talking about how this thing could play out. It's presumptive that that is perfectly constitutional. Now, to anybody with common sense that hasn't had the, unfortunate experience of going to law school and having your brain brainwashed, they know logically that makes sense. He should be able to talk about that. But anyway, that's those two big ones. And then unofficial acts, meaning it's not something he shares with Congress. It's not something he was doing as president. Doesn't have immunity. Now, the last thing, Gene, real quick, in the weeds a little bit, they threw out Trump's argument that he could not be brought to trial until after an impeachment and actually a conviction. Now, I will say I disagreed with them on that from the beginning. I talked about it before. When you read the impeachment clause, it doesn't say you have to be convicted of impeachment before local authorities can go after you for something that you did. So I think the Supreme Court got that right. I don't think Trump needs it. I think it was kind of a throwaway. So that part, not a big deal. The left is going to seize on that and say, oh, the Supreme Court sided with the prosecutors and against Donald Trump. That one, don't worry about it when you hear that. The big issue is that a lot of this goes back to the district court. And don't forget how corrupt the D.C. courts are right now. It's these federal courts in D.C. are absolutely, it's so corrupt right now. And so this is going to go back to them, and they're going to have to analyze much closer the conversations with Mike Pence, the conversations with others, and they're going to go look at whether or not on these things that could be presumptive that they might be able to come up with something that could somehow be criminal. What it means to us today, none of that's going to happen before the election. So they basically, what the Supreme Court just did, they really sided with Donald Trump and didn't give him a total win, but it sets it aside really for the election. There's no way I don't think that they're going to be able to get this back in time for it to be an issue for the election. So anyway, I think it's a big win. I think the Supreme Court got it right down the line on this thing. And for Donald Trump, he should be celebrating tonight. Last thing I'll say in wrap up is just, man, Gene, there's been so many good things that have happened over the last week. People should be full of hope tonight.
Amen.
But not to the point that they get lazy or that we go, oh, okay, I guess I can take a break. No, man, it's pedal to the metal. Between now and November, we're not letting off the gas. We have to go full steam ahead. And then, of course, as we talked about at the Flash Talks and even Friday evening at FlashPoint in Ohio, after November. So we got to start thinking past November as well. We got a lot of work to do. There's been a lot of damage in our country, but I am so thankful for some of the mending that has happened in the last week. Thank you to the Supreme Court.
Amen.
And to Donald
That's
Trump
true.
for putting those 3 new appointments on the court. And this is hard for me, Gene. You know that. Thank you, Justice John Roberts, for a good decision today on the immunity case. I'm glad to see that he gets it right sometimes. I shouldn't say it that way. No, it was a good decision. It was a good decision. So we got a lot of good stuff happening, brother.
In fact, I was with our great real president a couple weeks ago, and we were talking, and I said, God's got his hand in all this. And I said, all the destruction, I said, has really opened people's eyes. And you talk about pastors. If you can't evangelize now, you got problems. You should be able to, all of us should be able to go. People are looking for hope, and that hope is Jesus Christ.
That's right.
But I said, all of the stuff that's going on, I told our real president, is doing good. I said, people are pouring into this bucket, the greatest revival for Jesus Christ ever, and into the bucket of common sense. And he said to me, he goes, but Mike, things are getting, it's like a mountain of stuff. He's destroying our country. And you could just see that, is it going to be insurmountable or something like that? I said, sir, I said, with God, all things are possible, and him working through you.
There it is.
You're going to get it done faster and better and stronger than ever. And he looked at me and he basically said, amen,
Amen
and
to that.
I really believe that. I'm so optimistic, as is Donald Trump. He fights. Courage is contagious, everybody.
Right. It sure is. All right, Pastor Hank, we got about a minute and a half. Go ahead.
Well, I think we got to remind ourselves of what God said in 2018 and 19, that the decade would start off harsh, but then it would come into rest. That's why I love Mike Lindell. It's why I also have my pillow as well as my slippers. I'd encourage those of you that are watching to do the same. And when you put them on, you celebrate the rest that God is bringing this country in. Also, God is resting his case, which means his righteousness and justice is being seen through the courts. And we will see vindication. But more than that, we are going to continue to see flops that turn into flips. And we're going to see our country, it is being saved by the intervention of Almighty God. So don't lose hope, stay strong, and remember to give thanks as we're seeing these victories.